Okay, so we've been talking about what I call interpersonal jazz, which is thinking about our one-on-one communication in the same way that jazz musicians think about their duets or their duos that they have with others, and to try in a way to capitalize on some of the techniques that they use and in a way some of the mentalities that they take as they're interacting with one another. So I refer to this all as interpersonal jazz. So I want to teach you something really simple. One thing that jazz musicians do is they use what's called a call and response. So the call is either somebody making a vocalization or playing something on an instrument, and the other person responds to it. So it's just a call and a response. And the call could be, you could think of it sort of as a question and then the response as an answer. We could also think of it as the call is just an expression, maybe the expression of an emotion, and the response is another response, an expression that goes with that. So very simple. Two musicians are playing together. We have a pianist and a drummer, and the pianist plays do 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 do, and the drummer goes do 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 do, and they're just call response. And to do this simple thing, and it ends up becoming really complex, and we see this sort of an improv, and it's really becomes interesting and intricate, but it doesn't require much to do it. Jazz musicians only need a few certain things to be able to do the call and response. They need to have knowledge of jazz, some of what jazz is, knowledge of their instruments, of their voices. They need to have an understanding of kind of the ebb and flow and the timing of things. It also requires some trust between musicians. You have to trust that the other person will respond in some way to you. You have to trust yourself to be able to put a call and a response out there. In addition to that, it involves some risk. Anytime you're doing some sort of improv and relying on somebody else, this is a risk. And jazz requires risk. So this simple call and response pattern requires some risk. It also requires that both of the musicians have some degree of patience. Think of the basic idea of a call and response. It is one person putting something out there and waiting for the other person to respond to it. And so you each become on the other person's time. And in order to let the other person take the time that they need, you've got to be patient. So this simple act requires some degree of patience. It also requires, I would argue, some compassion and some empathy. On the empathy side of things, it requires you to try to feel what the other person feels. That's empathy, really. It's just feeling the emotions that somebody else feels. Compassion, on the other hand, is this desire to help somebody. And so compassion in this sense is the desire to make whatever they're doing good, or at least to make it something that you can both do together. So you need all these different types of things, but they're all relatively simple. Knowledge, understanding, trust, risk, patience, compassion, and empathy. But really, all that you really need to do this call and response is a bit of love for each other. And I know that sounds a bit cheesy, that you just need love. You need to be a human being, and you need to have some degree of love for the other person. That's really all it takes. And interestingly enough, all of us have that. All of us are human beings. All of us are capable of love. And the idea of love, I think it is a little bit sappy and cheesy, but it's also pragmatic. Love allows us to do so many different types of things. So I'll put that as the very sort of baseline for call and response, is that you have some sort of love, just an inkling of love for the other person. Because then all those other things can come on board. The compassion, the patience, and then you can bring in your knowledge and understanding. So let's apply this to interpersonal communication, which is what we're trying to do here today. So oftentimes when we're communicating, we'll get into a situation where we're in an interaction and somebody does something unexpected. They do something that throws us off, or maybe pisses us off. They say or do something that we just didn't expect, and it makes us angry, or it makes us sad, or makes us anything. Insert any emotion you want in there. This person does something unexpected, and it makes me feel this. Whatever that is. If it's unexpected, it often throws us, out of whack. And, whatever the case is, it might be that they said something in a way that was just a little bit more condescending than we anticipated. Their smile was just a little bit too wry, and we picked up on that. Or maybe their smile was a bit too seductive, and we picked up on that, and it threw us off. Whatever the case is, something happened either verbally or non-verbally that threw us off communicatively, threw us off of what we felt is our normal rhythm. And what I think is interesting is that all of us not only are capable of navigating these situations, but we do it all the time. So we become relatively decent at doing it. We're able to have something unexpected happen, and we're able to navigate it. All of you are able to do that. You have very likely done it many, many times before. So the problem isn't that we can't do it at all. What I see as problematic is that while all of us can do these types of things, we don't always navigate the situations very well. So it doesn't always go good for us. And what's worse is, very often, we don't enjoy the interactions. So when we're thrown off of something, when we feel thrown off, we don't enjoy what happens after that. We don't enjoy the experience. And I think that's not a good thing. We want to find ways to enjoy things. And what's probably worse than that is we don't use the moment to really connect with the person, or to really grow with the person, or change with the person, or evolve with them. And that's the whole point of communicating in the first place. Whether or not it goes perfectly smooth, the goal is to change and connect and to grow together. And so that should be what it is we're trying to focus on, whether or not things follow this perfect pattern that we sort of have built up in our mind. So let's take an actual real world scenario, something that you may have experienced, or at least that you can imagine along with me. Right, so you're sitting down for lunch with a friend, and you happen to feel like crap. And you feel like crap because you just had an argument with a lover, and it didn't go well, and you feel bad about it. You're feeling so bad that you probably can't even describe what your emotions are. You can't describe them, but you could try. And that's good enough to be able to try to explain our emotions. Let's at least start there, that we can try to explain. So you don't feel well, and you turn to your friend, and you say, so-and-so fought with me again, and it's just tearing me apart. And so you tell this person, your friend, it's tearing you apart. And they turn back to look at you, and they look up, raise their eyebrows, and pause for maybe too long looking at you, and already your mind is beginning to wonder, what is this person thinking? Did I just share something that I maybe shouldn't have shared? And then the person finally opens their mouth and says, listen, I just don't care. I don't freaking care, all right? I don't. And suddenly, you're reeling. You feel even worse. Your heart has sank another 2 levels. And you don't even know what that means. It's 2 levels. But you feel it, and that's what you're thinking. So this was unexpected. You expected lots of different things, but not that. Even if some sort of denial about it is okay, but this was really unexpected. And so now, what do you do from here? So let's look back to the call and response pattern in jazz and try to learn from what jazz musicians would do. Now, if you have any of the components that I mentioned you need to have for call and response, the knowledge, the empathy, the compassion, if you have any of those components, you're going to be able to do this. You're going to be able to get through it. And if you remember, I gave you the baseline, which is, are you a human being capable of love? If you've got that, then both of you will be able to get through this, because that's all that you need. But let's get a little bit more specific. Right, so let's think about how they might navigate a situation like this. We've got a singer and a drummer, 2 jazz musicians, so a vocalist and a percussionist, going to be a little more specific. And they're at their local place that they play at, and they're playing something, sort of cool and relaxing. Everybody's sort of jamming out, and the audience is almost not even paying attention because it sounds so smooth. And then suddenly, the singer, the vocalist, puts out a call, looking for a response. So she's just singing along, la, 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 and then suddenly she's like, ah! And the percussionist is like, got the call. It's like, ba-da-ba-ba. And the singer comes back to the singer, and it's like, that wasn't enough. The call comes back, ah! And the drummers, ba-da-ba-da. Still not enough. The call comes back, ah! Finally, the drummers, ba-da-ba-ba-ba-ba. And they keep going. And now, the song that they've put together here is something that is unique to both of them. It's something that will have changed both of them, changed not only their relationship, but the way each of them thinks and feels, which is, really what it's all about. And the key thing for them is that they don't stop. When the call comes out and the responses come back, they keep going. And once they're done with this song, they keep making new songs. And they keep making more music. And that's basically the template for the call and response, is that it's imperfect, you do it, you keep going. And so when we bring that back to thinking about interpersonal communication and lunch together, what can we learn from this sort of classic call and response? So let's really try to ground this. I think what jazz tells us is that what will limit us the most in this scenario where we've said something to someone and they've given us a poor response or a response we didn't like, what will hurt us the most is stopping. And even just stopping mentally and saying, I'm done with this. I'm not gonna keep going with this. This was too much for me to take in this moment. So jazz musicians would tell us, no, it's definitely not too much. If it is too much, that's great. You're gonna make something really interesting. And that's cool. You should definitely be thinking about making something interesting. So your friend has said to you, I don't freaking care about what's going on with you. And that can be tough to hear. And maybe in that moment, you need them to care a little bit. So tell them that. Tell them that, you should care. I just said I've been torn apart, and you don't care. Let them know that. Put the call back out there again. What you don't want to do, though, is be communicating with a goal that is so specific that it cannot be achieved, or that it might not be achieved. Your only goal when communicating should be to share, to change together, to grow together, to evolve together. So you shouldn't be communicating thinking, I want or need to get this type of response. And all too often, that tends to be what we do in those situations. We have sort of these ideas in our mind that these are the few things I'd be really pleased with, these are the things that I'd be sort of pleased with, these are the things that are unacceptable, that I will shut down if I get those. That is not a great way to go about communicating. Too often we're looking for something or fishing for something, and maybe it would be nice to have the person say, yeah, it really sucks that this happened to you. Maybe that'd be a great response. But we can't communicate that way. There's two things that are important to think about in terms of this call and response as it relates to interpersonal communication. First, interpersonal communication can't be conditional. It can't be about the top responses that you want, the medium responses and the low responses. That isn't how communication works. We don't make good interactions together. We don't change with each other well if we just have a bunch of conditions that need to be met. And then we're only thinking through those when we interact. It doesn't allow us to improvise at all. It doesn't allow us to let new feelings come out that we weren't ready for. And that should be part of the fun, is to feel those new things. Secondly, and this is so important when it comes to call and response and jazz duets, interpersonal communication is not about one person. It's about two. It's about the songs you make together. It's about the moments you make together. Otherwise, you'd be doing it alone. And that's really different, to experience something alone versus with somebody else. And to both have experienced similar things and have changed in sometimes very similar ways. That's interpersonal communication. It's about the two of us. And you make these songs together, but if you stop, if you don't act like the jazz players, if you don't use it as the next thing to move you forward, if you stop, everything ends. You never get to the change, you never get to the evolving. And you're losing a major part of what interpersonal communication is, which is to interact and to change and to grow together. So I believe that not only should we never stop having duos with people, but we should never stop when we're in those duos. Short of something really, really negative happening. Again, if you have that bit of love, that spark of love that I mentioned from the onset here, that should be enough to tell you you can keep going. And if you both are feeling that, then you know you can keep going.